Have you ever felt that your mind is in control of your life, but in a way you can't understand? As if thoughts, impulses, and decisions came out of nowhere, leading you down paths you wouldn't always consciously choose? If so, you're not alone. Carl Jung, one of the greatest names in psychology of all time, believed that there are forces deep within us, unconscious, mysterious, and powerful, that shape our attitudes, our fears, and even who we believe ourselves to be. And the truth is, if you don't learn to recognize these forces, they will control you. In this video, you'll discover how to master your mind before it dominates you. Let's explore Jung's profound ideas, such as the shadow, the collective unconscious, and the process of individuation. Concepts that may seem complex, but that, when understood, completely change the way you see yourself and interact with the world. But before we dive into this transformative journey, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here, you will find content that challenges your mind, provokes real reflections, and helps you evolve inside and out. If you like to go beyond the surface, this is the place for you. Now, take a deep breath. Make room for the unknown within you. Because, from now on, we are going to descend into the deepest levels of the human psyche to reveal a truth that can change everything. Imagine that inside you there is another you, a side that doesn't always show up, but is always present, acting behind the scenes. Sometimes it comes up when you lose control, overreact, feel fear for no apparent reason, or sabotage yourself when you're about to achieve something important. Carl Jung called this hidden side a shadow. And understanding what this shadow is the first step to taking true control of your mind. The shadow is not just that which is bad, ugly, or negative. It is everything that you have rejected about yourself throughout your life. It could be your anger, your ambition, your repressed desires, or even forgotten talents, valuable parts of your personality that you have been teaching to hide in order to be accepted. The shadow forms when you repress who you really are to fit into what they expect you to be. The great danger of this is that the more you deny your shadow, the more power it gains. Jung said that what you do not bring to consciousness manifests itself in your life as destiny. That is, as long as you don't look at this hidden side, it will continue to make decisions for you. And you won't even notice. It's like living on autopilot. You think you're in control, but who's driving is a part you don't even know well. And the worst, this part is driven by fears, traumas, and patterns that have been formed since childhood. When you explode with anger, paralyze at an opportunity, or get into the same kinds of toxic relationships, it's probably your shadow at work. But calm down. This does not mean that you are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. On the contrary, as you approach your shadow, you begin to see clearly what was previously invisible. And that is the key to freeing yourself. To dominate the mind, for Jung, is not to control everything all the time. It is to recognize and integrate the parts that have been excluded, hidden, forgotten. It is making peace with what is most human in you, with your light and with your darkness. And that takes courage. It requires an honest look, without masks. But the result is powerful. You begin to act with more awareness, more freedom, and more authenticity. The integration of the shadow is not an event, but a process. Gradually, you will notice how certain behaviors are repeated. You will identify triggers, questioning beliefs, rescuing parts of yourself that were lost. And in this process, you get stronger. You stop being hostage to what you feel and begin to understand why you feel. He is no longer dominated by impulses and starts to choose more clearly. And that's where the transformation really begins. When you welcome the shadow, it ceases to be a threat and becomes an ally. It shows you where your wounds are, but also where your power lives. Jung believed that it is precisely in the shadows that his greatest potential for growth lies. Because gold is often hidden in the darkness that you avoid facing. So, if you want to master your mind, the first step is not to try to control everything, but rather to get closer to what is inside you and has been forgotten. Because it is in this encounter, as uncomfortable as it may seem, that the beginning of a truly free mind resides. And it is precisely when you begin to explore this unknown territory that an essential question arises. If there are parts of you that you yourself do not know, where does such profound content come from? Who put them there? And what does it reveal about who you really are? If inside you there are parts that have been forgotten, repressed, or never even recognized, it's natural to wonder where they came from. Were they born with you? Were they built throughout life? Or are they part of something even bigger, older, that transcends your individual experience? For Carl Jung, the answer lies in a deep and fascinating concept: the collective unconscious. Unlike the personal unconscious, which stores memories, traumas, and repressed emotions from its own history, the collective unconscious is a kind of ancestral memory, a deep layer of the psyche that connects all human beings through universal experiences. It contains symbols, patterns of behavior, and images that are part of the history of humanity. Even if you've never seen a dragon or a goddess, for example, chances are you instinctively know what these figures represent. This happens because these symbols live within all of us, in the so-called archetypes. Archetypes are universal structures of the collective unconscious. They are like psychological molds that influence the way we think, feel, and act. The hero, the sage, the mother, the rebel, the lover, these are just a few examples of archetypes that appear in human stories, mythologies, dreams, and behaviors over the centuries in all cultures. They are as old as humanity itself and are still alive in us, even if we don't realize it. The presence of archetypes in our minds profoundly influences who we are. Often, you feel like you're living a story that has been lived before, that you are following a script that seems not to have been written by you, but that fits perfectly into your deepest feelings. This happens because these patterns live within us. They shape our desires, our fears, our searches, and even our innermost conflicts. The shadow archetype, for example, is one of the most powerful and dangerous, as we have seen. But there are others, such as the hero archetype, which pushes you to seek overcoming, to get out of your comfort zone and face life's challenges. There is also the archetype of the sage, which arises when you begin to seek knowledge, truth, and understanding. When these archetypes are not recognized, they can unconsciously dominate your life. But when you understand them, you gain the chance to integrate these forces and live with more purpose. Jung believed that much of modern angst comes from living disconnected from these internal symbols. Instead of listening to the language of the soul, which speaks through dreams, intuitions, images, and emotions, we try to silence it with logic, distraction, and control. But the soul is not silent. And the more you ignore these deep callings, the more you feel like you're empty, lost, or disconnected from something essential. Recognizing the archetypes that are active in your life is like turning on a light in a dark place. You begin to notice the roles you have been playing without realizing it, the stories you are repeating, the paths you are walking not by conscious choice, but by force of old patterns that live in you. And that's when something powerful starts to happen. You stop being just a character and start becoming the author of your own story. But for this, it is necessary to go beyond observation. It is necessary to experience. Jung called this process individuation, a path of deep self-knowledge, in which you stop being just what the world wants you to be and begin to become who you really are, in essence. And it is precisely in this process of becoming whole that the biggest challenges arise, and also the biggest revelations. Because in seeking integration, you don't just find answers, you find yourself. Becoming who you really are may seem like a simple, almost obvious goal. But in practice, it is one of the most complex and challenging processes in human life. Carl Jung called this path individuation, a profound journey toward wholeness. This is when you stop living under the weight of external expectations, social masks, and imposed roles, and begin to integrate all aspects of your being: light, shadow, reason, intuition, instinct, and soul. Individuation does not mean becoming someone perfect. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It is about accepting imperfection as part of existence and, from there, seeking authenticity. It is a path of real self-knowledge, where each step reveals a little more of its essence. And most importantly, it is not a final destination, but an ongoing process. At each stage, you get closer to who you really are, not to who you learn to be to please, survive, or fit in. At first, the process can be uncomfortable. After all, it means questioning everything that has always been taken for granted. The beliefs inherited from the family, the values absorbed from society, the behaviors learned to be accepted, all of this is seen with different eyes. You start to wonder, is this really mine, or is it something I carried around without realizing it? This type of reflection can shake internal structures, but it is also what makes true reconstruction possible. One of the great obstacles of individuation is the fear of what you will find. As you delve into the unconscious, you are faced with intense emotions, forgotten memories, and truths that are difficult to face. It can be painful to discover that part of your life has been guided by insecurities disguised as certainties. But Jung taught that there is no light without shadow, and there is no growth without confrontation. But the confrontation here is not war. It's a meeting. You don't have to fight what you feel, but you do have to learn to listen. Often, anxiety, anger, or sadness are not enemies, but messengers. They show that something inside you needs to be seen, recognized, welcomed. And it is precisely this welcome that strengthens you. Because by accepting what is in you, even what seems ugly, fragile, or contradictory, you begin to heal. At this point along the way, something begins to change. You feel more aware of your choices, more connected to your values, more present in your own life. Decisions are no longer automatic. Relationships gain depth. And the world around you seems to reflect more clearly what you are inside. Of course, the process of individuation does not eliminate the challenges, but it transforms the way you look at them. You begin to perceive conflicts as opportunities for integration, not as personal failures. And that makes all the difference. Because there is no longer a rigid separation between what is good about me and what I need to hide. Everything becomes part of the same being, whole, complex, real. This journey, however, is not done alone. Along the way, other people, friends, mentors, therapists, partners, function as mirrors. They reveal parts of yourself that you don't see yet. Sometimes, what irritates someone the most is precisely what you have not yet recognized in yourself. And when you realize this, you get another chance to integrate. Jung said that the greatest privilege in life is to become who you really are. And this privilege is available to those who have the courage to look within, listen to their own soul, and follow the path, even when it does not make immediate sense. But there's one last piece in this puzzle. Because even after integrating the shadow, recognizing the archetypes, and treading the process of individuation, an essential question remains. What is your purpose within all of this? What does your inner journey reveal about the role you came to play in the world? When you begin to truly know yourself, to integrate your shadows, to recognize the archetypes that influence you, and to consciously walk the path of individuation, a greater concern inevitably arises. Why does all this matter? Why all this effort to dive so deep into yourself? The answer may seem simple, but it carries immense depth. Finding meaning. Find out what your purpose is. Carl Jung believed that human beings cannot live fully without a sense of meaning. More than success, more than recognition, what really sustains the soul is the feeling of being aligned with something greater. This something greater doesn't have to be religious or mystical, though it can be if it makes sense to you. It can be a mission, a vocation, an inner calling. A feeling that your life has direction, even if that direction isn't always clear. Purpose, for Jung, is not a fixed goal. It is a process that will reveal itself as you walk honestly. It is not something you choose rationally, like someone who selects a profession in a catalog. It is something that emerges from your unconscious, from your heart, from the experiences that have marked your history, and from the values that make your soul vibrate. And the closer you get to your essence, the more signs you begin to notice. These signals can come in the form of intuition, significant coincidences, sensations that propel you in certain directions. Jung called this synchronicity, external events that connect with internal states in a symbolic and meaningful way. Sometimes, an unexpected encounter, a phrase heard at random, or even a vivid dream can carry important messages. The key is to be attentive, present, receptive. Following the purpose is like listening to a song that only you can listen to. And the more you try to silence it, the more disconnected you feel. That's why so many people experience a constant sense of emptiness, even when they seem to have it all. Because they are not living in tune with who they really are. They are following ready-made scripts, expectations of others, paths that were not chosen from the inside out. But discovering purpose doesn't mean abandoning everything and starting over from scratch. Sometimes it's a subtle change of look, a new way to relate to what you already do. Other times, it is an invitation to courage, to change direction, to start something new, to get out of the known. The most important thing is that purpose is not about perfection, but about coherence. This is when your actions begin to reflect your deepest truths. And living with purpose doesn't just transform your individual experience. It also affects the collective. When you are at peace with yourself, you become a more conscious presence in the world. Your decisions start to consider the impact they generate, your relationships gain more empathy, your energy inspires change around you. Jung said that the salvation of the world is in the individual who becomes aware of himself. Because a conscious person influences everything around them without even realizing it. This is the point at which self-knowledge is transformed into contribution. When you know yourself, you position yourself. And by positioning yourself, you create, you transform, you leave marks. And it is in this movement from the inside out that its purpose begins to touch the world. But there is still one last layer to this deep dive. Because even when living with purpose, integrating its parts, and walking a conscious path, the mind remains active. Questioning, creating traps, trying to pull you back into the old pattern. So before we end this journey, we need to answer the most practical and perhaps most urgent question of all. How in real life can you maintain mastery over your mind every day in the face of challenges, distractions, and external pressures? Mastering one's mind is not a feat reserved for spiritual masters or great thinkers. It is, in fact, a daily practice, quiet, personal, and profoundly transformative. After understanding your shadow, recognizing the archetypes that influence your journey, walking the path of individuation, and reconnecting with your purpose, the most constant challenge of all arises: sustaining this state of consciousness in the midst of routine. Because the world doesn't stop. The pressures continue. And the mind, if it is not watched carefully, regains control without you realizing it. The mind is not your enemy. It is a powerful tool. The problem is when you stop using it and start being used by it. Jung said that the mind is like a mirror. It reflects what is happening inside you. But if that mirror is dirty with too many stimuli, distorted beliefs, and automatic thoughts, the picture you'll see will always be confusing. That's why developing mindfulness becomes essential. Being conscious on a daily basis is much more than thinking positively or repeating affirmations. It is learning to observe your thoughts without identifying with them. It is noticing it is taking a deep breath in the face of the impulse and asking, where does this come from? Does it serve my purpose or does it take me away from it? One of the most effective ways to maintain this state of presence is to cultivate simple rituals. We are not talking about mystical rituals, but conscious habits that anchor you in the present. It may be the habit of writing a journal when you wake up, reflecting on your feelings. It can be a walk in silence, where you just watch your thoughts as clouds pass by. It can be a time of day dedicated to reading, meditation, or even contemplation. The important thing is to create pauses, gaps in the fast pace, to reconnect with what is essential. Another crucial point is to choose carefully what you consume. Everything you see, hear, and read feeds your mind. And a mind fed only by noise is unlikely to be a fertile space for clarity. When you begin to know yourself, you naturally develop a more refined sense of what expands you and what puts you to sleep. And it starts to better select its sources, its conversations, its environments. Jung also warned of the danger of over-identifying with the persona, that social mask we use to function in the world. Although it has a necessary role, to live only for it is to live by half. When you start to get confused with the character you created to protect yourself, you lose touch with the essence. Therefore, a powerful exercise is to ask yourself, regularly, is what I am experiencing my choice or an unconscious adaptation? Maintaining mastery of the mind requires discipline, but not rigidity. It demands attention, but not paranoia. It's a subtle balance between listening to your thoughts and listening to life. Between planning and allowing yourself to be surprised. It is, above all, a practice of returning to yourself, day after day, even when everything seems to want to take you away. And it is precisely in this constant return that true freedom is revealed. Not as the absence of problems, but as the presence of awareness. You continue to live the ups and downs, the joys and the challenges, but now with a more awake, more whole, truer look. We then reach the point where everything connects. The shadow, the archetypes, the purpose, and the mastery of the mind are not loose pieces. They are parts of the same journey, the journey of becoming who you were born to be. And now, all that's left is to take one final step, to look at all of this with a new understanding and bring these truths together into a clear, inspiring, and transformative conclusion. At the end of it all, the journey to master the mind before it controls you is actually a return, not to a physical place, but to yourself. It is a process of rediscovery, integration, and awakening. Carl Jung showed us that the real conflict of the modern human being is not outside, but inside, between what he is and what he has learned to look like, between the deepest desires of the soul and the silent impositions of society, between the light that seeks to shine and the shadow that insists on being denied. Along this path, we understand that the shadow is not an enemy, but an essential part of who we are. That archetypes are not ancient fantasies, but living forces shaping our emotions and decisions. That the process of individuation is not a luxury, but a necessity for those who want to live authentically. And that purpose is not a destination to be reached, but a direction to be followed with an awakened heart. To dominate the mind, therefore, does not mean to control it forcefully, nor to silence it on the basis of repression. It means observing it with presence. It means understanding its pitfalls, but also valuing its powers. The mind is a creator of realities, and when you align it with your essence, it becomes an ally of the soul. Thought ceases to be noise and becomes a bridge. Emotions cease to be obstacles and become compasses. And life ceases to be survival and begins to be expression. This journey has no end. It is alive, dynamic, constantly evolving. There will be days of clarity and days of confusion. There will be moments of strength and moments of vulnerability. But with each conscious step, you get closer to yourself. And when it gets closer to you, everything starts to make sense. Even pain takes on a new meaning. Even detours are necessary. And even silence becomes an answer. The great truth that Jung offers us is that there is no true freedom without self-knowledge. As long as you don't look within, you'll continue to be moved by forces you don't understand. He will continue to fight wars that are not his own, repeating patterns that he does not understand, seeking outside what will only be found within. But when you decide to walk that path, when you commit yourself to your soul's truth, something changes. You stop just reacting to life and actually start living it. And perhaps this is the most transformative point of all, realizing that the mind, no matter how complex it is just a reflection. And that, by illuminating what is inside you, you transform everything around you. Not because the world has changed, but because you have changed. And when you change, your perception changes. His gaze changes. Your path changes. Let this be the beginning, or continuity, of your journey of consciousness. May you allow yourself to dive, integrate, awaken. And above all, never forget, the mind is powerful, but the soul is wise. And when both go together, the impossible becomes possible.